Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining. We will just give it another minute or so to allow everyone to filter in, and then we'll get started. Hopefully you can hear me okay and see the screen and everything, and it's all working. Do let us know on the chat if not for whatever reason. Hopefully it's all good. Great, I can see more of you joining. It's amazing. Great. Okay. Ross, if you're happy, we can get started because it is being recorded. So for anyone that joins late or misses a bit, you'll be able to see the recording afterwards, which we'll send around in a follow-up email. So welcome everybody to this Action Sustainability webinar, which is titled A Practical Guide to Communicating and Delivering a Sustainability Strategy. Before I introduce ourselves or talk a bit more about what we're going to cover, a little bit of housekeeping, although I'm sure we're all quite used to these sessions at this point, but as I said, you will be receiving a follow-up email with the slides, the poll results, and also the recording. So don't worry too much about taking too many notes. You'll be sent lots of information afterwards. Your microphones have been muted, but you can use the Q&A feature if you have any questions. We'll have some time at the end to do a bit of a Q&A, and please use the chat function as well if you have any comments or ideas or anything that you want to add. Please do feel free to use that. But for any questions, please use the Q&A because then it all is kept in one place and it makes it a bit easier for us to navigate answering questions and making sure that we cover as many as we possibly can. Quite a simple agenda for this session. I guess we only have actually about 45 minutes to go through this content. So we'll do some introductions so you know who we are. I'll then talk about delivering a sustainability strategy. So going through the steps of actually delivering your strategy, developing your strategy, what we would recommend as those key steps to make sure that your strategy is bespoke and effective. And then Ross is going to cover communicating a sustainability strategy. So going into much more detail on that communication piece. How can you actually make sure that your strategy is implemented effectively and everyone understands it? And then at the end, as I said, we will have a bit of time for a Q&A. Before we go any further, I wanted to introduce you to Mentimeter because we're going to be using this throughout the session. We just use this so that we can ask you questions. We can just check in with you throughout the session, helps make it a little bit more interactive. So to join, you can scan the QR code that's on the screen. Hopefully you can see that, or you can just go to menti.com and enter the code that's on the screen there as well. So I'll give you a few moments to get connected onto Menti. And do let us know on the chat if you're having any issues with Mentimeter at all. But I can see quite a few of you have already joined, so that's a good sign. Means it's probably all working okay, which is great. And maybe we can also put the Menti instructions on the chat as well so that you still have access to it as we go. But that's great. I can see that 42 of you are connected to Menti. We'll wait for a few more of you to get connected. And we'll be going through this throughout the session. So I recommend that you just leave this up on your phone so that it's very easy then to just come back to it when you need to. Great. I'm going to launch the first question because Ross has very kindly put the code on the chat. So for any of you that haven't joined yet, you still can, and they'll still be at the top of the screen. First question, probably a nice and easy one. We'd like to know, what kind of organization are you from, or what size is your organization? And what we're going to be covering today is applicable to any organization of any size, so don't worry about that, but it's just good for us to see, who have we got here? What kind of organizations are you from? So most people have selected 250 plus, and then we've got pretty level for the rest of them, whether it's 1 to 9, very small, or 10 to 49, or 50, 250. Great. I'll see if anyone else wants to respond before I move on. Great. And then next question, before we get into anything else, where would you say your level of knowledge is when it comes to a sustainability strategy? So you can select no knowledge of how to develop a strategy, the three pillars, how to develop a strategy. Maybe you know how to undertake a materiality review or how to drive best practice. Where would you say your level of knowledge is? And there's no right or wrong here. This is also anonymous. It's just useful for us to see on here. Great. Okay. A fair amount of you have selected the three pillars and also how to develop a strategy. Um, some of you have said no knowledge. That's absolutely fine. You're in the right place. This is very much applicable to those of you that are at the start of your journey. So that is great. And I'm sure some others of you will learn things that you don't already know still as we go as well. So that is great. Thank you for responding to those Menti questions. We will be coming back to Menti as well. So as I said, just leave it up on your phone. I realised that we haven't introduced ourselves yet, so it's about time we do that. My name is Hattie Webb. I'm a consultant at Action Sustainability as part of a team of consultants that also my colleague Ross is part of. And I specialise, or my background is in net zero carbon and sustainability strategy. So I end up delivering a lot of our strategy and carbon training. And so it's really great to be doing this session today, obviously talking about the strategy side of things, but also bringing Ross in to talk about the communication side of things as well. So Ross, if you'd also like to introduce yourself, that would be great.
Thanks, Hattie. Yeah, I've been a sustainability consultant for over 10 years now, and I'm kind of leading on I suppose, the sort of science communication side of the business at AS. I've got quite a diverse kind of background in various sustainability topics, and now do quite a lot of work with clients around, how can you turn some of the complex information that we often find ourselves dealing with in sustainability into something that your employees or your supply chain or anybody else for that matter might need to understand, and how to actually kind of drive change in an organisation as well.
Great, thanks, Ross. And a little bit of an intro to Action Sustainability, and maybe we'll also be able to send our website as well so that you can find out more. But we're essentially a one-stop shop for all things sustainability, whether that is consultancy, which is the team that Ross and I are part of, which very much is sort of bespoke, that expert guidance, whether it's carbon reduction, modern slavery, sustainable procurement, or sustainability strategies, which is what we're going to be talking about more today. We also offer training through the Supply Chain Sustainability School, but also bespoke training sessions such as these, whether you need training sessions for your colleagues or your stakeholders. And then technology, we have our sustainability tool as well, which allows you to be able to collect, manage, and report your sustainability data as well. So that's what we cover. And as I said, do go check out our website or reach out, because Keegan's put some contact details and links in the chat as well. So we'd be really happy to talk to you a bit more about what we do if you're interested. I'm now going to delve into delivering a sustainability strategy and the steps that we recommend that every organization should take in order to make sure that they develop and deliver a bespoke and effective and robust sustainability strategy. So I'm going to take you through what we call our strategy cycle, going through these different steps. First of all, looking at research, understanding your competitors, your clients, and the wider market. Then going to talk about identifying your drivers, impacts, and enablers. Thirdly, then actually developing your strategy with those goals and commitments. So we'll talk a little bit about terminology. Then we'll look at then we'll look at creating an action plan, monitoring that implementation, measuring. Then Ross is going to cover that all important communication side of things. So I'll whiz through these steps and then we'll spend a little bit more time on communication. And then we'll summarize just looking at that continual improvement piece, how we can make sure that we're training and educating who needs to be upskilled on all things sustainability as well. So that's what I'm going to be covering in the next part of the session. First of all, I thought it would just be useful to actually cover what we mean when we're talking about sustainability strategy, just to make sure we're all on the same page and we have that sort of foundation of understanding. So when we refer to a sustainability strategy, we essentially mean a document that outlines your organization's plan of action to achieve your sustainability mission and objectives. So simply put, what that means is what are your sustainability impacts and how are you managing them? So more specifically, who's managing them? What's your time frame for managing them? Obviously making sure that this is something that is very much tailored and bespoke to your organization, because it's not necessarily going to be a one size fits all approach. It will need to be bespoke to your organization, your priorities. And as you can see here on this little sort of diagram, infographic, I guess, you can see that for some organizations, they'll have their wider sustainability strategy, but they'll also have strategies that go underneath that as well. So potentially a carbon strategy or a sustainable procurement strategy, maybe a social value framework. And all of these tend to sort of fit into that wider context of a sustainability strategy and might provide sort of more detail than what might be included in that overall sustainability strategy. So keep that in mind, especially when I talk more about research. You might find that particular clients or competitors have a range of different strategies. So it's always interesting to see what approach other businesses and organizations are taking when it comes to this. But it's very important to have that wider sustainability strategy that sort of covers everything with regards to sustainability and your priorities. And then you might have the detail that sits underneath. Just quickly touching on some of the business benefits of having a sustainability strategy. Of course, there's more of the obvious ones. It can help you reach your goals in terms of helping the environment. It can help with compliance as well to make sure that you have a clear process in place for ensuring that you remain compliant. It can lead to efficiencies, cost savings, helping to attract and retain talent as well. Maybe when you work as well, it can help you really stand out and obviously help you to communicate your sustainability ambitions, which is what Ross is going to talk more about later. A bit about terminology, because appreciate that these words are banded around quite a lot when we talk about strategies in general, actually, goals, commitments. It can be a bit confusing. And what I'd say actually is just make sure that you're consistent within your organization of what these words mean. So everybody is very clear on what they're talking about when they say our goal or our commitment. So typically what we'd say is that a goal is a long-term outcome that you want to achieve. The commitments are more sort of getting more specific than that, what you're committing to that will help you achieve your goal. And then targets and objectives. These are similar, but they could also be a little bit different. These are more the short-term actions that will help you to achieve your goal. So it could be that a target is more precise, it might be more quantifiable, so it might have a number, e.g., reduce water usage by 15% in 1 year. Objectives are more sort of those detailed, actionable steps. So an objective might be implement water-saving technologies in all facilities, as an example. So that's an overview of the kind of words that I'll be using throughout and what they mean. And I also just wanted to touch on, some of you might be wondering, okay, we've got a sustainability policy. Isn't that basically a strategy, or what's the difference? So just to iron out what the differences are between a strategy and a policy. So your strategy is that overall framework that you have. It includes your vision, your mission, those goals, objectives, and targets that I just mentioned. It's your plan of action for delivering your sustainability initiatives. So, what you actually do within your business process to deliver those. Strategies also typically quite long term. We can see strategies going up to 2030, 2040, and it's very much dealing with those external factors as well. What are your sustainability impacts and how are you managing them? A policy kind of sits within the strategy. It's your principles of action, it's a set of rules for rational decision making, and it's the breakdown of what you're committing to within your strategy and how you'll go about achieving that. So, whilst you do often see policies sitting publicly online, it might be on your website. It's actually an internal process. It's what you're committing to internally, what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, and that is sort of set of rules, as I said, for that decision making. So those are the differences between a strategy and a policy, just so that hopefully that is clear for you. And we'd recommend that you have a strategy as well as a policy, because they're different, they have different purposes. But that's a bit of an introduction, and now we can head into our strategy cycle, looking at step one, research. Now, there are many different ways you can do this research. This is one of the methods that we use. We do what we call a benchmarking exercise. So we look to see if organizations have certain criteria. So, do they have a sustainability strategy? Do they have a policy? Do they have targets? And we'll sort of score them based on their maturity for each question. We award different points, and then we can compare them. So we can look at what their overall score is, and then it allows those comparisons to be made. So you can look at your own score for your organization, and you can compare that to your competitors or your clients. It's essentially a gap analysis. It's looking at, okay, where are the gaps? Where are our competitors doing better than us? But also equally, where are maybe we ahead of our competitors? And then that's just as useful to know as well. And again, that links in with communication. It maybe might highlight certain elements that you should be shouting about, because you are actually doing things that are above and beyond what your competitors are doing that maybe you didn't realize. So this is a really useful exercise to understand, okay, what are we missing? What should we be focusing on? How can we make sure that we're ahead of our competitors? So that's research. Step two, we recommend that you identify your drivers, your impacts, and your enablers. So this is really understanding what is relevant to your business. This is very much the tailoring part, the making sure it's bespoke. And this diagram is actually taken from the Supply Chain Sustainability School. So on the left, you can see we have the drivers. This is the why. What is driving you as an organization to be more sustainable? And this will be different for each organization, because for one organization, it might be climate change that's the key driver. For another, it might be customers and health and safety. So it's important to understand what your drivers are now, as that will lead into then who you need to engage with and what your priorities should be for your strategy. That middle section in green, that is the what. So these are actually the 17 topics that sit within the Supply Chain Sustainability School. So this is working out what is relevant and applicable to your business. For example, if you produce a lot of waste, you might want your strategy to be around the use of materials and waste and resource efficiency. You can't cover everything. No organization can prioritize all 17 topics. So it's working out what should your priorities be, and making sure, again, that this is specific to your business and your operations. And then finally, on the right-hand side there, the enablers. This is what will help you to deliver your sustainability strategy. What do you need? Is it off-site knowledge? Is it procurement? And we'll look at that a little bit later on. So again, you can do an exercise to identify your drivers. So we kind of do this, use a sort of spider diagram template. And so you can, do it in sort of a workshop style. You can assess these 8 different drivers, and you can work out, which ones are driving you more with regards to sustainability. And you can look at it both for now, and then also in in the future. So you can see that that blue line there is looking at the now. So this is an example of an organization's response. So customers, competitive advantage, supply chain security are coming out as their sort of top drivers. Again, you can use this to shape your sustainability strategy, but you can also look at this from a future perspective. Will your drivers change? And that's that purple line there. So in this example, leadership, organization ethics, innovation are coming up as potential drivers for the future. So you can use this to shape your strategy looking more longer term. As I said, strategies can be sort of up to 2040. So, how can we improve ethics going forward, for example? How can we include that in our strategy? Another way in which you can identify your priorities is undertaking what we call a materiality assessment. I'm not going to go into this in huge detail in this section because it's not what we're focusing on. I've also just realized that very confusingly, my slides say the same steps. So we will change that when we send the slides around afterwards. So apologies for that. I realize that that's quite confusing actually. But another thing that you can do by identifying your impacts, you can undertake a materiality assessment. So this is a way of looking at those sustainability impacts and working out, okay, what should our priorities be in terms of impact to our business and also importance to stakeholders. So again, you could literally just get people in a room or a virtual room and you could look at this together and say, okay, where do we think this should be plotted on this graph? And that can help you identify your priorities. I mentioned enablers. Again, enablers will be different for different organizations. This isn't also an extensive list. There might be other things that you need to support your strategy. It might be procurement or other types of strategies. So it's important to think about what do you need. How can you make smart, tangible actions and commitments? And again, this will help you in the long term. We wouldn't recommend that you set targets before having an idea of how you're going to achieve it. And that's also where the action planning comes in after you have set your goals, which is all about this next step, setting goals. And this is just an example of the kind of long-term goals that you could set. And this is an example actually taken from one of our clients' websites. So they said we'll be zero avoidable waste organization by 2030, we'll enable all colleagues and supply chain members to be the best that they can be. We aspire to be a trusted partner to improve indoor air quality, and will leave a lasting positive impact for the communities in which we operate. So of course, these are the wider long-term goals, and you can quite clearly see here what their priorities are. They've decided to prioritize waste, people, air quality, and communities as well. So you can see how they've really honed it down into these key priorities that then make up their long-term goals. And now it's about creating an action plan. So you've got your goals, you can then take yourself through an action plan. And these are the sort of subheadings that we recommend you include in your action plan. Obviously, you have your goal, which was the previous slide. You can then identify your tasks and your subtasks, what priority level these tasks and subtasks should be. Is it urgent? Is it not so urgent? What resources required? RACI matrix, so working out who's responsible, who's accountable, who should be consulted and informed, and then of course your timescale. When does this need to be done by? And we'd recommend you include training as part of this, as well as part of that sort of continual improvement piece. Because you can have a fantastic strategy. We'll talk about this more with communication. But of course, if you're not communicating it internally, if you're not training people effectively, then it could just end up sitting there and creating dust or virtual dust, which of course is not what we want, especially if you've gone through all of the, the effort and the time to create a really great strategy. And you can do something like a training needs analysis. Really working out who needs to know what, when do they need to know it by, and actually how much training each person needs to be, because you don't want to be giving someone who is really busy and, maybe works on site or, doesn't have the time to sit down or the resources to sit down and do, a full 45-minute e-learning. So working out what type of learning works best for each colleague as well. And then just looking here at the monitoring the implementation and that sort of measuring piece as well. And we're not reinventing the wheel here. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this plan, do check, act, cycle. But it's the same thing. You can, use this for your sustainability strategy as well. And I'd say with regards to sustainability in general, don't feel like you have to reinvent the wheel or start a whole new process. Use those business processes that you already have for continual improvement. So of course, uh, planning is, planning, defining your strategy, doing and collecting that relevant data, check, monitor and measure, and then act, use those results to influence those decisions that then improve your strategy going forward. And we recommend that your strategy is reviewed and revised on a regular basis to check that it's still in line with external factors, but also in line with those internal changes that might be happening in your business and organization as well. And then measure, managing, and reporting on your performance. I just wanted to cover terminology here. Of course, you'll be sent the slides afterwards, so you can go back and reflect on some of these terms. But again, it's really important we're speaking the same common language when it comes to this. So your goal, we've mentioned goal, the overall aim or desired, results. Then you have your target, so that might be something like 90% waste diverted from landfill. You then have your indicator. So this indicates the progress against your target, and we might need certain metrics to be able to calculate that indicator. So in this example, we need to know the total waste diverted from landfill and the total waste generated, and then that will give us the percentage of waste diverted from landfill. So really important that you know how you are measuring progress. What data do we need to actually understand when it comes to the end of our reporting period? Have we achieved this or have we not? And again, this links in with smart targets, making sure that any targets we set are measurable as part of that as well. Okay, so that brings us to the stage in our cycle when we look at communicating our strategy effectively. I appreciate I've been through and I've whizzed through quite a bit of information there and I've covered a lot. So please do use the Q&A if you have any questions or get in touch if you'd like to discuss any of this in more detail. But I'm going to hand over to Ross now, who's going to take us through communication.
Thanks very much, Hattie. And yeah, like I say, if anyone's got any questions for Hattie or myself, obviously there's the Q&A, so feel free to kind of put anything in there. So yeah, next slide, please, Hattie. Basically, I think it's one of the things about obviously developing a strategy is one thing, but how do you actually create something that's actually going to kind of make a difference and have an impact? And this is where communication comes in. It's a really, really important part of the process. And I guess there's kind of four key things that you really need to consider from a communication perspective, and when you develop strategy and sustainability resources in general. First one being your audience. So who you're actually creating these materials for. If you understand that person, then you can create something that's going to appeal to them, something that's going to resonate with what they think, and actually, that help you drive change in your organization. You also need to think about the key messages that you're conveying. Now, I think we're all guilty of this, but when you're kind of really kind of deeply embedded into something, you want to include all the detail. You want to kind of really kind of show people what you know and all the kind of hard work that you've done. Unfortunately, the reality is, when people are kind of coming to things for their own needs, their own purposes, or coming into it cold, you need to try and hack that down, and you need to try and really understand what the key messages are. So what the key things that you want people to take from the resources that you're building. Feeding into that, you need to think about your tone and narrative. So what kind of how are you writing, or how are you kind of developing the resources that you're producing? What's the tone? Are you ensuring that will appeal to your audience? And also, are you thinking about a narrative as well? Because it's all well and good trying to sort of put some words on a piece of paper. But actually, you need to build that into something that has a kind of start, a middle, and an end, that kind of will enable it to kind of resonate with people as well. And then the other thing which I'm going to kind of touch on in this section as well is thinking a little bit about format. And there's definitely there's no kind of I suppose a limit really to what we can do with format, but there are certain things that we do have a lot of experience with, looking at developing resources online and in person as well. That again, it feeds back into those points around what your audience is, what your key messages are, and then the tone and narrative. Obviously, how you then deliver it's really, really important as well. Next slide, please, Hattie. And why is this important? And I've touched on it in the previous slide, but again, I think there's four key things that we need to consider. We're communicating stuff because we want to improve people's understanding. We want to take them from point X to point Y. Once they've kind of seen the materials, they have a better understanding of what you're talking about. This then enables more buy-in. So you have people that are then kind of more on board with what you're trying to do. They feel invested in what you're trying to do as well. And they're kind of, they're on the journey and they want to make a difference. This then drives a behavior change. So you're taking people from, doing something to doing something else, or thinking about what they're doing or doing something differently. And then obviously, hopefully, this then drives an impact. And from a sustainability perspective, we're looking to improve sustainability performance. We're looking to kind of make that positive difference in the world, hopefully. So yeah, key things to understand. Next slide, please, Hattie. And I just wanted to make the point as well that obviously, if you go lots and lots of hard work to develop a really good strategy, but you don't communicate it, then that strategy is effectively invisible. So what you're trying to do is remove the kind of invisibility cloak from all that work that you've done to kind of make it front and center and in people's minds. Next slide. So getting into the detail, and I think really audience is one of the most important things you think about from a communication perspective. There's a few kind of key questions that you need to ask yourself. You need to think, well, who is this for? Why are we developing this strategy? Why are we developing these resources? What are we trying to achieve with it? Ultimately, what do they care about? So kind of trying to appeal to kind of what they need to do in their day jobs, what their kind of role is in the business, what do they actually care about, so that you can develop resources that will kind of appeal to them. What do they already know? This is a really key and interesting question because in my role, I suppose I see it kind of two ways. You see people that kind of really want to start at first principles, start at basics, make sure they're really kind of at that kind of somebody really that's come to something without knowing much about it. Or you have on the flip side organizations that that kind of have all the knowledge and instantly want to hit everyone with all the kind of really technical detail. You need to understand what your audience already knows, and you need to pitch whatever you're creating at a level which will kind of slot in with their understanding, and also bring them up so they're kind of developing their knowledge and getting better at what they do as well. You need to think about what they do differently, so what they need to do differently. So what you're trying to change, feeding into that behaviour change piece, and also what will they respond to. And this is something I'll cover it in a little bit more detail. But the kind of format, the kind of what kind of type of resource that we potentially want to produce. Are they going to respond to something online? Are they going to respond to something in person? Are they going to respond to something that's in a group setting or individual? And all these kind of questions that we can kind of get into when we think about specific resources. And I suppose from an audience perspective as well, there's always this kind of issue with organizations where are you developing something internally? So if you're developing something internally, is it about kind of capacity building with your employees? Is it that kind of onboarding piece when people are coming into organization and you're trying to kind of give them a bit of a snapshot of something? Is it something that's trying to appeal to the senior leadership team? So are you trying to kind of get that sort of top-down level buy-in with something, with what you're producing? Or is it something that's to do with a specific project? So are you working on a specific project, or are you working on a joint venture where there's specific requirements? And actually, is that something you need to consider as well? And obviously that's not an exhaustive list, but that's some of the common things that we kind of think about with communication materials. And then obviously there's on the flip side, there's something that's external as well. So if it's external, are we talking to clients? Are we talking to subcontractors? Are we talking to investors? Is it that joint ventures piece that I talked about? Or are we kind of having a more kind of a wider frame where are we actually trying to communicate to the communities where we're working? Are we trying to communicate with NGOs or other organisations like that? And again, that's not an exhaustive list. And also what I would say is there's obviously potential to develop resources that are dual purpose as well, but where we're looking at kind of multiple sort of stakeholders, but they are really key things to consider. Next slide, please, Hattie. Um, and then actually, when we kind of get into the key messages piece, this is about really trying to understand what your audience needs to know. Again, trying to not separate the wheat from the chaff. We need to prioritize, what are the key things that people need to know. We also need to, and once we kind of know what they need to know, brevity is really, really important as well. I think it's something that's increasingly important these days with the advent of social media, that kind of thing. People's attention spans are really, really, really short. And actually, the kind of the shorter we can make things and the more simple we can create things, the better it will be. Obviously, still achieving all the things that you need them to. I think one of the key things as well, which is really important, is actually sometimes it's really really useful to go back to your audience and actually ask them, well, what do you need to know about this? How can a better understanding of sustainability improve what you do in your job? And that can be a really really good way of trying to unlock some kind of really important things that can actually feed back into the development of the strategy, and also kind of feed back into how you create your communication materials as well. Um, so how can we sort of start to think about developing and delivering communication resources in that kind of interesting way? Maybe we need to start thinking beyond spreadsheets and start thinking about stories. People remember stories. It's kind of one of the ways the human brain is kind of programmed is to, think in stories. We need to develop a narrative that has that kind of beginning, middle and end, that people can kind of see. And we also need to kind of show that value as well, show you the value of sustainability, which can be a really good way of getting people on board, can be a really good way of kind of showing why you're doing this kind of stuff. And obviously it's really, really great to use actual examples. So things like case studies and that kind of thing, things like client testimonials, things like that kind of thing, which can really, really work. Um, Next slide, please, Hattie. And then when we think about tone and narrative, again, I know I'm saying audience a lot in this presentation, but it's really, really, really important. And actually, when you're thinking about that tone and narrative, you really need to think about who your audience are. Um, if you develop a story, and a story will improve retention, understanding, and memory of a topic. So, I've just included that picture on the slide there. This is some of the earliest, I suppose, evidence of human existence on planet Earth. Cave paintings in places like southern France and in sub-Saharan Africa. We don't really know who these people were. We don't really understand much about them, but we have these paintings and we kind of have a rough idea of what they cared about. And I think it's just an example of actually kind of that importance of a story and that importance of narrative that we can take into developing communication materials now. And then, from a tone perspective, again, it's about striking the right balance. We can make things really, really dry, very, very factual. Or, if we kind of look to take some of that, but also put a little bit more of the other kind of maybe more conversational style, then people will engage more. But we need to balance it, and we need to make sure that we have a kind of a tone that builds that trust and credibility, but is also really, really engaging as well. What are we trying to achieve when we think about tone and narrative? We're trying to maximize that audience engagement. So we're trying to make sure that people are actually viewing the resources, they're appreciating them, that if they are useful to them. And actually, when we delve into it a little bit more, it's about kind of reducing the resistance to new ideas. So sometimes in sustainability, we can be in a situation where people might feel like it's that kind of add-on to what they might be doing, dare I say it. But if we're building communication materials in the right way, we can hopefully break down some of those barriers, and we can reduce that potential resistance to new ideas, and we can make people really kind of engage and kind of take on board what we're trying to get them to do. Next slide, please, Hattie. So, where do we see some of the common pitfalls with communication materials? So again, it's about this piece. We quite often people get really technical really really quickly. Can understand why, because it's a technical topic. There's lots of elements to it, and people want to kind of demonstrate all the hard work that they've done. But if we go too technical, then people switch off. And if there's too much data, then people struggle to see what the actual meaning of that information is. Also, if we do a kind of one-off launch and there's no kind of strategy or kind of communication strategy around what you're trying to do, then there'll be something that's in a corporate newsletter or kind of flashes up in an email once and people forget about it. But you need to make sure that any kind of launch for a strategy is kind of built into kind of additional materials. So, if you're kind of looking at things like an e-learning module, that's the kind of core maybe of how you communicate a strategy, but then you're looking at maybe doing a couple of other little videos that kind of might sit on the company website or wherever you need them to go that kind of build that picture and kind of maintain interest. Um, Targeting resources to specific needs. I would say this is a kind of double-edged sword because it actually can be quite useful if you have a specific role or a specific problem in an organization. Then you might want to kind of really target in and actually say, okay, we want to use some materials to try and really solve this issue. But obviously, the double edge of that sword is that you potentially create something that's too specific and is not relevant for particularly long. It dates quickly, and then its use is less. It becomes less useful. So I think it's just something to consider, and actually kind of what you're doing, what's the time frame of the resources you're producing, and then obviously with communication materials, it's really, really important to get that feedback to make sure they're hitting the nail on the head and they are really, they're achieving what they want to do. It's very easy to kind of produce materials and put them out the ether and not actually kind of get that feedback from your audience to say, well, has this worked? If we're going to do another one, how won't we make it better? What could we improve? So it's feeding into, I guess with any kind of consultancy work, that process of continued improvement, which is really, really important. Next slide, please, Hattie. So what kind of key formats do we use for developing and communicating sustainability communication materials? So at Action Sustainability, we've got lots and lots of experience developing things like e-learning. We've developed all the e-learning in the supply chain sustainability school, which I think is now well over 100 e-learning modules. We've got lots of experience developing bespoke e-learning for clients as well. So this is where we develop resources, that's specifically tailored to client needs. E-learning, I think, again, is an interesting topic. I think there are lots of people, I'm sure there's lots of people sat on this call that have sat through an e-learning and thought, oh, this is dry, this is boring. I wish this was better, and it might be there might be better uses of my time. It's really important with e-learning to try and make it as engaging and as interesting as possible. When we develop e-learning, we really try to kind of up the interactivity as much as we can. We really try and make it as short as we possibly can as well. So, maximum half an hour, I think is one of our recommendations. And also trying to include as much sort of interactivity as we can. So trying to include, dilemma exercises where you have to make decisions, trying to include, simple games like spot the difference and that kind of thing that try and get people engaged in a topic. The sky's the limit really with what you can do. Animated video shorts, again, really, really good. If you want to kind of make a specific point or talk about a specific issue, there's various bits of software out there where you can create, short animated videos, and they can really kind of, be that kind of snapshot into something. Again, it can be really good as something that can sit as a part of an induction or can just sit on a website or that kind of thing, or even used to communicate to suppliers. Face-to-face video is really good. And face-to-face video is something that can be a standalone little kind of snippet that you produce, again, 2 to 3 minutes. It's really good, especially if you've got a kind of senior leadership team or you want to share a specific case study or something like that and get somebody on camera talking about a topic. It can also be something that is a standalone resource that you can have and also then sit into your e-learning as well, because we can embed all these resources into an e-learning module. Workshops, really, really good if you need to get people sat in a group situation, solving a problem or talking about an issue or any kind of engagement really. Again, with workshops, it's about creating the right number of slides, the right level of interactivity, and making sure that we're not just sitting on a Teams call with people doing their emails in the background. We're really trying to get people involved in that and using various techniques and various kind of breakout sessions and that kind of thing to get people engaged. And then again, we can also look to do kind of more traditional materials like infographics. A poster can go a long way if it's done in the right way to communicate specific things. And yeah, obviously it's something to have in the armory. And there's lots of obviously this is definitely not an exhaustive list. You need to think about your audience and actually then kind of match what you think will work. And and just kind of build from there. Next slide, please, Hattie. So what do we do? Just some of the examples of some of the resources that we've produced in the past. So you can see there's just if I start at the top left, it's creating those animated videos where we've got characters that come to life that talk about particular topics. We've got examples of e-learning modules in there. So you produce either kind of e-learning that's kind of just click through with text, or we can have animated videos. Where we have characters and you click through things and you go on various journeys. So there's an example there of a module that talks about procurement, where we've got two characters and you can kind of click on one or click on the other and find out what trials and tribulations they go through to achieve sustainability in their organisation. And then, obviously we can do things like developing bespoke graphics and kind of get people to explore scenarios, explore situations that then, they have to problem solve. They might have a dilemma where there's not obvious right or wrong that they have to kind of think about. And obviously that then hopefully builds learning and retention, and you can kind of build in things like narrative into that as well. And then the other example, which is, I guess, that looks like the kind of all the little post-its stuck on the thing. I just wanted to highlight the fact that, online workshops are a really important tool, and you can have really good outputs from that as well. So if you need to get information from what people think or get some kind of ideas from a team, then you can use software. It's the kind of online equivalent of the A1 piece of paper with post-its stuck to it. But that can be a really, really good way of trying to harvest information from people. And then my next slide, which is an example of a face-to-face video. And before I show it, actually Hattie's going to show it. I think for me, it's just really interesting to see what you can communicate in 3 minutes. So this is an organisation. We produced this video for a project with the Prince's Trust, and it was about kind of small businesses that are trying to integrate sustainability into what they do. And I just think it's, you think about what you could read in a strategy in 3 minutes, and then what you get across in this 3-minute video. It's a good example of some of the things we can do. Hopefully the sound works.
So I'm James Otter from Otter Surfboards, and we design and make wooden surfboards here in Cornwall. I came at this with a sustainability mindset, so I was fed up with the foam boards that I was using and plastic boards that I was using. Just they'd fall apart and there'd be nothing you could do with the product at the end of life. And me as a woodworker, I love how connected to the ground and the ocean and the environment I am as a woodworker, so bringing those natural materials into the space of creating surfboards for me was really fundamental to try and find a way to make a surfboard that was truly sustainable. As it's evolved, as the business has evolved, we invite customers in to come and get involved in the making process, so we run our workshop courses, and getting people on board with that is really crucial for helping the longevity of the product, which is for me again another sustainable element, is trying to make things that last a long time. So by getting people involved in the making, they become much more connected to the object itself, to the surfboard. So they nurture it, look after it, care for it in a much better way than they would do something that you just buy off the shelf. For me, I guess that everything that we make starts out with the material that we're making it from. So for me, the decisions around where that material comes from is fundamental to our impact and our sustainability. Not only for how it's grown, how it's nurtured, and how the land is looked after and managed, but also then what we do with it. We used to get all of our timber from a local sawmill in Cornwall, but the quality and consistency just wasn't there. So because the woodlands just aren't that healthy in Cornwall, there's not that much of it. So we looked a little bit wider, which is why we now go up to Wiltshire, and we now know that there's a real kind of quality to the wood that we get, but also the way that the woodland is managed. I've been to the woodlands because I know the guys that run them. And when you see a tree being felled, it's quite a monumental thing to witness. I know I need to use as much of that tree as I can, and I know I need to make something to the best of my abilities that's going to last as long as it can and have the least impact. You can see on this one here we've got the cedar, which is the predominant timber that we use, which is lightweight, and the one from Wiltshire. That's the orangey timber. Then we've got the poplar down the middle, which is the pale timber. And then this board here, actually, you've got all the things that we do. It's got these thin, dark strips down it, and they're actually from a local kind of timber suppliers. We go and raid their offcuts bin, and we only need tiny strips, so using up someone else's waste for me is a great place to be. We kind of have our sustainability focus, And then we build things as best we can, so we have this craftsmanship element, and as a result we end up with the lifestyle that we lead. Whereas our customers, typically they're drawn in by the idea of the lifestyle, and then they kind of conceptualize and understand the idea of craftsmanship and longevity. And then they go, oh, and you're thinking about sustainability as well. So it's a complete reversal of the way that we approach things. And also, I love how when we run our workshops, we're in a space where we can kind of expose people to those things, even if it's when we're on the beach, just doing a small beach clean and showing them the plastic that washes up on our beach. Like, it's a really nice space for us to educate people about sustainability and how to protect our planet.
So I think, it's a really good example of what you can get across in 3 minutes. I think you get really good, idea of what Otter Surfboards are all about, what their kind of sustainability priorities are as a business, where their strategy is, and, it's a multi-purpose resource for them as a business. Next slide, please, Hattie. And I suppose I just wanted to kind of really just give you a bit of an overview of the sort of process that we go through to actually develop resource. And there's 3 kind of stages to it. So stage 1 is what we call storyboarding. So this is where we develop initial ideas. We kind of, normally we would phrase them as learning outcomes. So a resource, depending on what it is, like an e-learning module that's half an hour, would probably have 3, maybe 4 learning outcomes. So when the learner's completed the resource, they will understand, they will be able to ... Once we've got an idea of what the learning outcomes are, we then storyboard out. So how are we going to kind of communicate? How are we going to develop resources that speak to those learning outcomes, that enable people to kind of build that knowledge once they've completed the resource? Once we've done that, we then look to stage 2, where we're developing the individual resources that we actually need to kind of produce the resource ultimately that we're going to create. So, for an e-learning module, it might be something like writing a script. For a video, it's about kind of thinking about, well, what are the kind of prompt questions that we're going to ask? Who are we going to talk to? How are we going to kind of piece that video together? What other kind of bits of I guess kind of resource are we going to need? Are we going to need additional kind of cutaway of X, Y, Z, or are we going to need this kind of imagery, and how are we going to bring that together? Obviously, we then go at a process of peer review, as you would with any resource. So, kind of working with our clients to kind of make sure that we're on the nail. There is a kind of real cut-off at this point, because one of the things about these types of resource is that once you go beyond the sort of point of actually kind of writing them, if you have a Word document with a script in it, for example, once you then kind of go to record some narration or develop some video, obviously that's an expense that becomes much more harder and expensive to unpick that. So we say there's that hard kind of cut-off, signing off those resources before we actually go to development. As we progress out of stage 2 into stage 3, we develop those resources. So we shoot the video, we record the narration, and get the kind of materials that we need to produce for the e-learning. And then in that stage 3, it's a development process where we're kind of working with developers to bring those resources to life. We normally work with a program called Articulate 360 to develop actual e-learning, and we've got lots of developers that help us with that. And then for things like video, we have third-party subcontractors. So, for example, the video we shot then, I essentially act as a kind of producer, and we have subcontractors who, their day jobs are working for the BBC and various organisations to kind of develop resources that we can draw on. And then we go through that kind of review again, not necessarily about the technical content, but just that kind of, is this working for you? What's the look and feel? Then ultimately we kind of support organisations to then get it loaded into their learning management systems and wherever it needs to be. Next slide, please, Hattie.
I think we had the mentee next.
Yes. So I'm conscious we've got 6 minutes left. I just wanted to really quickly get an idea of everyone's perspective. What do you think is your biggest sustainability communication challenge? And this is a word cloud, so really keen to keep this really open-ended and just put down any thoughts that you have.
Yeah, we can just leave this up as well, so you can continue to add them. But we've got some coming through, which is great.
Actually, I suppose beyond this, it was really just about kind of, we've got about 5 minutes left now. Does anyone have any sort of specific questions for Hattie and myself? I think there's
Yeah, we do have some questions on the Q&A.
Yes.
So we can start making our way through this as you're adding to the Menti word cloud. Um, Tom said, good question. Where might the UK ESOS, for those of you that don't know, that's Energy Saving Opportunity Scheme or ISO 50001, fit into a sustainability strategy? Um, so I would say that if you have as part of your strategy, as part of your sort of pillar or key priority, carbon and energy as one of those sort of sections of your strategy, or sort of key focus, then the ethos would fall under that. It might be that you decide to include that in your overarching strategy, and then you go into a lot more detail by having a separate carbon and energy strategy or net zero strategy or something like that, which is where ethos would also fall into. Yeah, that's how I would recommend you include. Often I see a lot of our clients, they'll have sort of maybe three pillars as part of their strategy, and they might call it different things. It might align with ESG, or it might be people, planet. I saw a client yesterday, it was people, planet, practices, I think. So people call it, or companies call it different things. Depending on your marketing and your communication, as we've spoken about. So it might be that, yeah, under the planet section or the environmental section of your strategy, you include ethos in that because it fits in very nicely with carbon. So that's what I would recommend. I think Liam has said we
I
also
can
need,
see the questions, Hattie. I mean, I think Liam's making a really good point, and
yeah.
something I probably should have made more of in the presentation. But absolutely, yeah. Um, what do people think they already know is a really, really key question. And one of the things about communication materials is trying to sort of myth bust those misconceptions that absolutely can kind of arise in sustainability. So it's front and center of any kind of communication materials that, well, okay, how can we unpick any confusions or like I say, myths that people might have. So that's a really, really good point. Thanks for your question. Um, do we have any examples of where we've communicated a strategy using non-sustainability speak? I think we might have to take that one away, Hattie, and just have a think about where we've got a really good correlation, because quite often our clients are slightly different. We've got a couple of projects coming up, haven't we?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we've written multiple sustainability annual reports for clients. And we always try and make it as accessible and engaging as possible. And part of that process is interviewing as many colleagues and as many stakeholders as we possibly can, and really understanding from them, what would make you read a sustainability report and eliminating as much jargon and terminology as we can, at the same time as appeasing people that do need to know the detail, because some people actually do need to read all of the data and the facts, or at least know where that information is so they can access it when they need it. And what's interesting is a client we've been working with for a number of years writing their sustainability report, they've now decided this year to do a video to summarize their sustainability report, because they want to make it even more accessible for stakeholders to be able to, quickly understand their sustainability strategy. And that's alongside having a one-page version of their longer 40-page report. So there are a number of ways to ensure that you're making it as accessible for as many people as possible. But yeah, you want to try and eliminate that sustainability talk, technical talk, as much as possible. That's a really good question. Good point. We've got a few more coming in, just aware of time.
I said the video. That's an interesting question, Colonel. Maybe we should have a conversation if you're interested in developing resources, because I think it's one of the things that a standalone resource, and a kind of series of resources priced quite differently. So definitely economies of scale with things. So that was part of a bigger piece of work for the Prince's Trust. But what I would say is we've got some really good established relationships with third party providers, and we can definitely do things really efficiently. But yeah, I'm more than happy to take that a lot offline, have a conversation with you if you're interested to find out a bit more about pricing.
Okay, great. I'm just aware it's 12, so it might be time to wrap up there. But thank you so much for submitting all of your questions. Do get in touch if you haven't had time to answer a question. Do reach out, and those are our QR codes there. You can scan them, and also there are the links on the chat as well there. So please do reach out, get in touch if you have any further questions, and look out for that follow-up email with the slides and the recording and everything else you need as well. So thank you so much. I don't know, Ross, if there's anything else you want to add before we wrap up.
Thanks very much for attending. Hope you found it useful. I hope you found it interesting. And yeah, like I say, more than happy to continue any conversations off the back of this if it sparked anyone's interest. But thanks everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone. And thanks for all your words as well. We'll be sending around the Menti responses as well. So, yeah, thank you for listening. Hope you found it useful and hopefully see you on one of our webinars again soon. Thanks, everyone. Bye.